Hello and welcome back to the Complete Web Dev series. In this chapter, we are building a content management system, or CMS, with object-oriented programming. We're using PHP in this example. So where we left off in the last video is we created our login form, and we actually set the user ID to the session. So we actually technically have a logged in user, but there's still more functionality that we need to do. For example, if they click Remember Me, we want to set a cookie on the browser that lasts we're going to set it for 30 days. And if they have that cookie set when they visit the site, we're going to auto log them in. Okay, so let me switch over to my screen and let's get going. I do plan on finishing the login stuff in this video, so it should be the last video that we have pertaining to the login, unless we just missed something or whatever, but we can always go back. So I'm going to go a git branch to see a list of my local branches here. We left off on video 25, so we're just going to, this one will be video 26. So I'm going to do git checkout -b, create a new branch from main, and we're going to call this v26. The next thing that I'm going to do is go ahead and push this to the remote. So it'd be git push -- set - upstream, and then we'll do origin and then v26. Hit enter. And now we are ready to roll. Go ahead and just also make sure that you have your XAMPP server up and running. So we've shown a lot of examples of that in previous videos, so hopefully you have that up and running. All right, so let's switch over to our code and kind of see where we left off. The first thing that we left off is we left this login function at just handling the login for the session. And we didn't set any sort of cookie. And we also didn't handle this Remember Me Boolean. So what we are going to want to do just conceptually is if we look at the database, we have a table called user sessions. And if you look at the structure of user sessions, it has an ID, a user ID, and a hash. And so what we want to do is when the user logs in, we're going to add a user session to this table with the user's ID, and then we're going to create a unique hash. And this hash, we will actually set that to the cookie in their browser. So then conceptually what's going to happen is when they visit our site, we're going to check to see if they have that cookie, and then we're going to grab the hash and we're going to search this database by that hash. And if we find the user by that hash, we're going to go ahead and log them in using the user ID that's present in this table. Okay, so let's go ahead now and start setting this up. But in order to do this, we want to set up a model to deal with the database. So let's go ahead first and create a new model. So the only model we have right now is the users model. So if you go to app models, let's go ahead and create a new file in there and call it user sessions.php. And then what we're going to do is open up some PHP tags, and then we're going to give this a namespace. And of course, the namespace on this is just going to be app \models, because it's in our models namespace. And then what we're going to do is we are going to use our core \model, which is the parent class here. And then let's go ahead and create a class to use here. So we're going to call it the same name as the file name. So this will be user sessions, and this will extend our extends our model, which is our core model. Okay, so it will extend that. The next thing we need to do is we need to set up the table for this. So the table goes in a protected static property called table. And we're going to set that equal to user_sessions. Now this is the name of our database table. See this user_sessions here. The next thing that we want to do is we want to add public properties for each one of the columns in the database. So we'll just add public ID, user_ID, and hash. And those are exactly the 3 columns that we have here in this table. So we have ID, user ID, and hash. So those will be properties on this user sessions model. That is all we need to do for the moment. We just create this model now. And let's go ahead and switch back to our users model and go back to our login function. So what we're going to do is now we're going to handle if they did check the remember me checkbox. And so in order to do that, we're just going to put an if statement here, and we're going to put if remember. Okay, and if remember, we're going to need a time. So let's go ahead and get a time, and we'll just set that equal to a variable called now, and we're going to use PHP's built-in time function. Now this will get the time in seconds, so this is just going to be a bunch of seconds. And in fact, let's go ahead and while we're here, we're also going to need to use the config class, and let's just throw the H class in there so that we can dump and die some of this. And right here, this config and this H we haven't used yet. In fact, we haven't used this cookie yet. So just make sure you have all of this imported here with the U's so that they come from the correct namespace, and our autoloader will load those in. All right, so oops, my AC is kicking on. Let me turn it off real quick. Sorry about that. It is kind of hot, so I might end up having to have it on regardless. All right, so what we're gonna want to do is let's go ahead and create our hash. Our hash, we'll just call this new hash, and this will be equal to an MD5. Now MD5 is an old hashing algorithm that PHP and other software used to use. However, an MD5 hash is not really suitable for like hashing passwords because people can reverse engineer these hashes. But we're not going to have anything sensitive in there, so it works really well for us. So we're going to use the MD5 hash here. And what we're going to do here is we have to pass in a string. And the string that we're going to pass in is this ID, which will be the user's ID. Remember, because we're on the model, the user's class right now, the user object. So this ID will be the property of the object. So we'll do that, and then we're also going to add an underscore, and then we're going to add now. So we're just going to use the time in there. So this will be a completely unique string. It's going to have the user's ID and then an underscore and then the time, which is another integer that will be the time in seconds that this hash is created. The next thing that we're going to do is actually create a session, and we're going to do something a little bit different here because eventually we're going to have these user rows in our database, and we'd rather find those by the user ID. So let's go ahead and use user sessions, and then we're going to call a static function called find by user ID, and we're going to pass in this ID, so the user's ID. So we're going to try to find a user session by this ID. Now this has red squigglies because we haven't created this yet. So let's go back now and go to the user sessions model here, and let's go ahead and add that method, which is going to be super simple. We're not doing anything crazy here. So what we can do, remember this is a static method, public static function, and we're going to call this find by user ID, and it will take a user ID as a parameter, and then all we're going to do here is return self find first, so we can use our find first method. So it's going to return a find first on the context of this object, right, or this class rather, because it's static. So find first, and we're going to give it some conditions. The conditions are going to be simple. It's just user ID is equal to user ID, and we'll bind that by adding another parameter or another element to this array called bind, and then we're gonna, that will be an array, and this will be an associative array with the key that will match this right here minus the semi or the colon, and then the value of that is going to be the user ID that we pass in right here just like that. So basically this, we didn't have to do this, but this function is now kind of what I would call a wrapper function, where now I can use it by just passing in an ID, and I don't have to type out this find first syntax every time I want to use it. I can simply just use find by user ID. So let's go back to the users model now. And in the users model, first I want to make sure that we have, we don't. So we need to go ahead and bring that in as well. So we're going to say use core backslash, not core, app backslash models backslash user sessions. Okay. That way the user sessions class right here will be namespaced correctly, and our autoloader will pull that in for us. All right, the next thing that we're going to want to do here is we have our session. Now this is going to be, this could be false, because remember in this we're just returning the find first. So if the find first doesn't find a row, this is just going to return false. Okay, so we need to account for that. And so underneath here we're just going to say, hey, if not session, then I want to do session is equal to, and then we'll just say new user sessions, like that. That way we have a user session object stored in this. Now what we could do is we could actually add that functionality into this method, but we may want to use that method in other ways, so I'm not going to do that for now. We'll just do it right here in this if statement. Okay, now that we have a session, and what I mean by session is this is an instantiated object that is either a row from our database that instantiates and sets these properties from the database values, or it's a newly instantiated object and all of the properties are going to be null by default. So what we're going to have to do is set those. So we're going to say session, and we're going to say user ID is equal to, and we're just going to put this ID, because in this scope this is an instantiated object of the user. And then we're going to say session hash is equal to new hash. Okay, so that will put this string in here. And then we need to just save this. So we're going to say session save. And now we have the session saved. Now, of course, the last thing that we need to do here is set the cookie. So let's go ahead now and use our cookie class that we created in an earlier video. And we'll just do cookie set. And I'll go ahead and throw my semicolon there. And this takes in a couple different things. The first thing that it takes in is it's going to take in the name of the cookie. And we're going to set the name of this cookie in our config, and it's called login cookie name right here. We already have it kind of set. Make sure yours is a random string. Don't just copy mine here. But yeah, so we're going to do cookie set. And so to set that, we're just going to say config get, and then login underscore cookie underscore name. Let me see if I got that right. Login underscore cookie underscore name. Yep. Once you've done that, we need another argument here. So the second argument is going to be the value. And the value of this cookie needs to be our new hash. Okay. And then the last one is the expiration date. How long is this going to last? So let's do, we'll make it easy on ourselves, and we'll just do the math right here in line. We'll do 60 seconds times 60 minutes times 24 hours times 30 days. So this equation will end up to be 30 days in seconds, because there's 60 seconds in a minute, there's 60 minutes in an hour, there's 24 hours in a day, and there's 30 days in a month, or roughly 30 days in a month. So we're just going to make it a 30-day cookie. So that will be it. That will set the cookie. So now let's save this and let's double check that this works. I suspect that I may have some typos somewhere, but let's go ahead now and I'm going to right click and inspect and click on application here. And if you click on over here in storage, if you go to cookies and click on localhost, you'll be able to see, well, this cookie is your PHP session ID. So that's set up. But once I log in, it should create a new cookie here. So let's go ahead and put in my credentials here and hit login. And we have a bad token action, so we got a problem. You know what? This might just be an issue from me doing something weird before. So let me try that one more time here. Remember me. Okay, there we go. So don't worry about that. That was probably just a stale token or something. But if you look here, I have the PHP session ID is here, but also we got a new cookie. And if you look at the name of this cookie, that will match the value in our config for login cookie name. Okay, that's what we're using this for. So if you look back now, you can see the name of that cookie is that. We don't want to make this so obvious if it's in someone's browser to be like login hash. And then this value right here, this B8B or 58B or whatever this is, this right here is an MD5 hash, and this is the value of our cookie, and that will be our our new hash right here. Okay, so the other thing that we need to check is make sure that this was actually inserted into the database. So if you go to localhost phpMyAdmin and then navigate to your user sessions table, go to browse, and now you see we have a new row here, and this row has the user ID right here, which is 7. So we can double check that in a moment, but I happen to know that my user ID is 7 because we looked at that before. And then the hash here is the same hash that gets stored in the browser cookie. Okay, so if we go back, you can see that this value right here is the hash that's in our database. So when they visit our site, what we'll be able to do is grab this cookie, find it in the database by this hash, and then log this user in. Okay, so let's go ahead now and let's do that. Let's go ahead and underneath this login function, let's create a whole new method here. And this method is going to be used to just log us in from the cookie. So it should be pretty easy as well. So we're going to say public static function. And then we're going to call this login from cookie. All right. So then what we can do is this login from cookie, we're going to set the cookie name. So the cookie name was equal to config get, and then we called it login cookie name, like that. Okay. The next thing that we're going to do is if there isn't a cookie, so if not cookie exists, so if not cookie exists, we're going to pass in the cookie name to see if that exists. And all we're going to do here is we're going to return false. Now this line right here is this whole kind of syntax. Well, this is an inline if statement, so you don't have to use the brackets if you don't want. Some people don't like these inline if statements. So if you go to work somewhere and they say, hey, we don't like inline if statements, then just don't do them. And you could do the same thing with brackets and just return false. I just think it's a little cleaner to do it on one line. The other thing is this is called a guard statement, because instead of wrapping a bunch of my code in an if statement, I can check if this doesn't exist and then just return, and then it will never make it to any code below there. So that's known as a guard statement. Okay, and I like guard statements quite a bit. So we're going to say hash is equal to, and now we know that this cookie will exist here because we just checked that in the line above here. So we'll do cookie name. Okay, so now we have that hash, and now we just need to find that session. Okay, so we're going to say session is equal to, and then we're going to say user sessions, and we're going to create another new one called find by hash, and we're going to pass that hash in. So it's another wrapper function that we'll need to create here in a moment. It'll be super simple. And then what we're going to do is do another guard statement, and we're going to say if not session, then from here we're also going to return false. Okay. The next thing we want to do is find the user. Now remember, this session is going to have the user ID in it, so we're finding it by the database find by hash, which we haven't created yet. We'll do that in a moment. But once we've gotten that user ID, then we can just find our user. So we'll say user is equal to self find by ID, and then for the ID we're going to pass in session, and then we're going to use the property user underscore ID. Okay, then what we're going to do is we're just going to say, hey, if there's a user, if we did find a user by that ID, then we're just going to run the user login, and we're just going to manually pass in true here to set the new cookie. So basically this is going to reset the cookie every time, which will give them a new expiration date. You may not want to do that, but in this case, if they're visiting the site every day, I don't care if they never log in again. It's just if there's 30 days that go by and they haven't logged in, let's go ahead and destroy that. That cookie will expire, and so I'm okay with that with this in this instance. All right, so this right here, login from cookie, gets called. Where do we call that? Oh, we don't call it anywhere just yet. We are going to, well, first, before we get too far behind, let's create this find by hash. I'm sick of looking at that little squiggly line. So let's go to user sessions, and underneath our last method that we created, let's create public static function find by hash, and this is going to take a hash. And then what we can do here is we can simply copy our logic from the last method here. So I'm just going to copy that, paste it here, but instead of searching for the user ID, we're going to search for the hash. We'll change this to hash here, and we'll change this key of this bind array to hash, and of course we need to change this user ID to our hash that we pass in. Now this will find the session, the user session from the database by the hash now, and that is an okay setup, because if you look at the structure of our table, we did add an index called hash here, so we can search the database by this hash with relative ease, and it won't be too slow even if there's a lot of them in there. All right. The nature of it as well is that it's going to find it by the user ID first, so there will never be multiple rows in here for each user. Okay, so now let's go back and let's work on something else that we need to do, and that would be, we want to create a function that we can use anywhere in our application to get the current logged in user. And we're going to use that as a shortcut as well to call this login from cookie. So let's create this function as well. So it's going to be public static function get current user. We'll call it that. Okay. And then what we can do here is, now this is a singleton pattern, so we want to check if there is a current user, because if you remember in our login function, we set self current user to this user object. So we can check to see if that exists. So what we're going to want to do is here, we're going to say if not self $_current user, okay, and the session, exists, and we're going to pass in logged in user. Then what we're going to do here is we're going to say user ID is equal to session get logged in, user, and then we're going to say self current user is equal to self find by ID user underscore ID. Okay, so this first check, it's basically going to say, hey, if there's not a current user set, but there's a session, meaning they have already logged in, and for some reason there's not a current user, this logic here is just going to set that. Okay, the next if statement is going to say, hey, if there's not a self current user, okay, still when it gets here, then we're going to call, we'll just do it in line here, we're going to call self login from cookie. Now this login from cookie is the method we just created, and we're just going to call that right here if there's not a current user. Okay, we don't want to do all that logic and work every time the page loads, so that's why we're well, it's still going to do it every time the page loads, but every time we use the get current user method, we don't want to call that, so we will set it statically, and it'll be a singleton pattern. All right, and then what we're going to do is we're just going to, after this if statement, we're just going to say, hey, just return self $_current user. That's it. So this get current user will return the current logged in user, but if that's not set, it's going to call this login from cookie, which will log them in, and this login will actually set the current user, and then down here at the bottom it's just going to return that. So that's good to go. But now, well, where's the entry point for this? We need something to call this method. We want something to call this so that it runs every time our application loads. And so we have a great place to do that, and that is in our index.php. So in our index.php, we could just simply, let's do it before, let's see, let's do it right here, right below our autoloader. Let's say check for logged in user, and we'll just, right here, we're just going to call, say, current user is equal to users get current user. Okay, so every time it loads, it's going to use this. Now, this is red squigglies, and that is because we are going to have to add that in up here. So we'll say use app /models /users. Okay, and we'll save that. And now let's go and let's see. This expires at 6:04. If I refresh, it's still 6:04. But let's find out really quickly. Underneath here, let's go ahead and just do our h dump and die, and let's see if the current user is being set up correctly and see if it's working. So yes, here's my current logged in user now, the ID 7, that's Curtis Parham, and now I have all this information that I can use at my disposal. Okay, so we have our current logged in user, and that is coming from this this hash right here in our cookie, and then it finds, if you go to browse, it finds it here and then logs in the user with that user ID there. Okay, so let me see, is there anything else we need to do here? We know for a fact that that's working, so we'll just save that. You know, I think that will wrap it up for the login stuff. Let me just double check a couple more things really quickly while I'm here. We're obviously going to do some more logic in the future that may add some stuff to these methods, but for now I think we're good to go with the login. Let's just double check if we log in as a separate user now. Let's go to our auth login, and now I'm going to try to log in as Tony, and hit remember me, log in, and you can see it updated that cookie. And if we look in the database and we hit browse, we have 2 rows in our user sessions now, because user 7 is logged in with this hash and user 6 is logged in with this hash. So now you can see that this works out just great. And these hashes should always be unique because the way we built that with the user ID and the time. All right, guys, well, let's go ahead and commit this to GitHub so you guys can pull this in. I think I went slow enough through it. Let me know if you have any questions. I hope you guys are enjoying it. If you are, please comment, like, subscribe. But I'm going to do a Git status here, and we can see the files that we have modified that are not staged. So to stage those, we're going to do git add period just to stage them all in one shot. Now if I do git status, these are staged, but they're not committed. So let's go ahead and commit those with git commit. We'll do a commit message along in line with this, and we're going to say log in from cookie, enter, and now we're going to do a git push to push this to the remote GitHub. All right, the next thing I'm going to go ahead and do is I'm going to check out main, and I'm going to merge, and you guys don't have to do this obviously, but anyways, I'm going to do a git merge v26, and I will push that up as well so you guys can get the full project on main or where I left off at the end of the videos in the branches themselves. So v26 will be this video. All right, guys, I'm enjoying the series so far. I hope you are. In the next video, I'm not sure what we're going to do yet because whatever I feel like when I sit down, probably it would make sense to go ahead and do the logout. Although I think what we need to do is do a little more work on the menu as well. So maybe we'll do some menu stuff and some log out stuff. All right, I'll see you guys in the next video. Peace out.